are markets that are better than others. And I really think there's a couple of different business models in the land space. One is what we talked about, kind of lower barrier to entry. It's more of a high volume, lower margin, smaller flip game. In that case, you are basically blasting all over. You're identifying markets based on a lot of people think and do sale velocity. So
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Jon Jasniak. Jon is a land investor and entrepreneur who's built an 8-figure land business since 2017. He's also the mayor of Cornudas, Texas, which brings up a lot of questions for me. But I want to say first, thank you for coming on the show today. I'm not sure that I've had any other mayors, so thanks for being here, Jon. I appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for having me, Jason. The unofficial mayor. That's an interesting title, but yeah, technically.
Yeah. Well, why don't you just tell us about your background, kind of what got you into real estate and land investing specifically, and even how you became mayor.
Yeah, man. Well, similar to a lot of folks listening out there, I would think, I found out about real estate on a podcast, just like this one. Like, I was working as an engineer, 9 to 5, typical stuff, driving to and from the work site, listening to the good old Side Hustle show with Nick Loper, episode 108. Another land guru, Mark Podolsky, comes on there, starts talking about land flipping. And, I was in the prime ripe stage looking for something to do entrepreneur wise, like make extra money, passive income, all this stuff. So he came on talking about that business model, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. I could buy and sell land. There's plenty of that in Texas, West Texas specifically, where I was working, and, decided to buy his course, bought another course as well, and kind of just dove in head first, just studying markets, studying the land game, how this all works, deeds, transactions, buying, selling, all that stuff, and kind of found my first piece way out in the middle of nowhere, West Texas, Hudspeth County, which full circle is where Cornudas, Texas is located, my unincorporated town that I bought last year. So kind of full circle story there. But yeah, my first land deal was out in Hudspeth County, 53 acres, bought for $8,500, flipped that sucker for a total of like 17, 18 G's. And it's kind of just snowballed from there. I quit my job a year and a half later and have been buying and selling land, now doing a lot of bigger subdivisions and large projects for the last 7+ years now. It's kind of crazy looking back on it. Time flies when you're having fun, I guess.
Yeah. It's interesting, and maybe this is just my perception of it, but I feel like there's been a lot of popularity in land investing lately, and I don't. That may be totally a social media perception on my part, that I'm just seeing a lot of people out there that are doing it. I don't know if you feel like more people have come into the mix since you started, but
yeah,
it seems to be becoming more and more popular. And I would say one of the things that always strikes me, and I've had really a small number of land investors on the show, but that first deal, kind of conversation or story, it's often, pretty small amounts of investment in terms of what you purchase that piece of land for, which I think, is appealing from a, barrier to entry type of situation where people are like, oh, I could do any other number of real estate avenues, but if I can get into the land game for, sort of lower out of pocket in the beginning, is
for sure.
Is that a misperception on my part? What are your thoughts on that? And, kind of when you got in there?
Yeah, the space is definitely becoming more competitive. It's not just a social media thing. A lot more people are entering it, especially because of what you mentioned with the low barrier to entry. And so you have a lot of beginner real estate investors getting into the land space, doing the $3, $5, $10,000 flips, turning around, flipping it for double, triple what they bought it for. So direct mail is becoming more saturated. These landowners are, finding themselves getting 3, 5, 10 letters in the course of, 6 months. They're like, oh, is there gold or something on my property? Like, why am I getting so many letters on my raw piece of land in the middle of nowhere, Arizona or Nevada or wherever? It's because, yes, more people are entering the space. You got folks like us, like me, teaching others how to do it. I have gravitated towards the larger projects, obviously more bang for your buck, less competition. It's more difficult. It's more challenging. I like that. But you get more bang for your buck, and that's the main attraction to it. But yeah, it's become more competitive. It's definitely a super low barrier to entry. It's probably the most simplest form of real estate, is just buying and selling a piece of raw dirt in the middle of nowhere. Just a deed.
And I guess the interesting thing to me is, I guess this goes for residential real estate as well, homes and things like that. But it seems like there are certain places, like you said, West Texas. I mean, there are areas of the country with sort of tremendous untapped resource as far as land, and maybe a lot of people don't think about it. Like I live in Los Angeles. I don't here. It's like there is no more land. No, there's no place you can go and like buy some land. But interestingly enough, you start driving up the coast, and all of a sudden it's like wide open farmland, not that far from LA. And I would imagine, I mean, I lived in Houston. Houston, same thing. There's no land there, but you get out, in that West Texas area, and it's just, you don't see anything for hours of driving time.
Yeah. Well, it's not just West Texas. There's a lot of places like that across the country, I would say, like your northern Arizonas, your Nevadas, a lot of spaces in Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, even like the panhandle of Florida, northern Michigan. Like a lot of these places come to mind, and I see it all the time on my social media posts. They'll see me posting, a piece of land in the middle of nowhere, or a larger piece, call it 500 acres, that I'm buying for, like 1,000 per acre, and they're like, oh, that's not possible. I can't believe that's possible. I live in Austin, Texas, or, in Los Angeles here, that would be $10 million. It's like, well, yeah, as you get closer to the bigger cities, some of these land prices can get crazy high. But believe it or not, there are a lot of places in the United States still that have a lot of wide open spaces of land where you can actually still buy land for, call it 1,000 per acre or less.
Yeah, I mean, it is crazy to think about. And again, it all just comes down to perspective. So you sort of readily listed off a bunch of markets. I would imagine that's a big part of the strategy, is sort of understanding what are the right markets to be in, both from land availability, but then you've got to have an end buyer. So how do you kind of marry that together and say, okay, here's a place. Are there I would assume there are places with tremendous amounts of land, but maybe there's a reason why it hasn't been developed yet, but then other spots that you can create some level of appeal. How do you select markets? How do you decide what your end user is going to look like?
Yeah, so I would preface this with saying I have sold just about any piece of land that you could imagine. Now, so that's preface with that. But that being said, there are markets that are better than others, and I really think there's a couple of different business models in the land space. One is what we talked about, kind of lower barrier to entry. It's more of a high volume, lower margin, smaller flip game. In that case, you are basically blasting all over. You're identifying markets based on a lot of people think and do sale velocity. So you're setting Zillow filters, you're in land.com, you're seeing what's moving, how many pieces of land are moving in 90 days, 180 days, etc. in a given market. What's the average days on market? Obviously, the lower, the better. And you're kind of trying to tease out these markets where it's low days on market, high velocity turnover, where you can go in, buy a piece of land at 30 to 50 cents on the dollar, and it's going to sell really quick. And in that case, you're identifying markets all over the country that have low days on market and, call it a a good solid churn of like at least 50% of your for sale inventory in like 6 months. So in a year's worth of time, everything, let's say there's 200 listings in that particular market, you would expect in a year's worth of time there to be 200 sales in that particular market. And that would be, a decent sale velocity. Now, kind of what I like to do is the larger project subdivide game. In that case, you are really getting into the weeds and trying to identify markets that not only interest you where you want to work, but also have a lot of demand. People who want to move outside the city. In a lot of cases, these are not desert squares like in the middle of nowhere. You could certainly buy 500 acres in the middle of nowhere and create 10, 50 acre tracts. But what we are targeting is lots that are, anywhere from call it 30 to 60 minutes outside of a decent sized metropolis, usually 100,000 people or more, where there's a solid population. People want to own a chunk of land, whether it's 1 acre, 5 acre, 10 acres outside of the city. And there are, pick your spot. Now, again, we're talking, you could do that anywhere nationwide. Every state in this nation has several cities that are, 100,000 plus population. In Texas, there's so many, obviously DFW, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, then your smaller markets like Lubbock, Abilene, Midland, Odessa, places in East Texas like Longview. All those are great markets with 6-figure plus populations. And now you just got to find a piece of land that's priced appropriately and deliver it to the market at a competitive price, which is what we try to do. We analyze what we think land is selling for or has sold for and kind of reverse engineer what we're going to buy it for in bulk so that we can, the more you buy, the more discount you're going to get. So if we're buying 500 acres, we would expect to be paying less than if we're buying 50 acres on a per acre basis. So I think there's really two different business models there in a way. I like think of it more of a shotgun approach where you're doing a high volume, lower margin game, a lot of flips versus a more micro, intense focused approach. I always tell people you got to get really familiar with an area, get to know those regulations like the back of your hand, and then you kind of start to understand the market from there. When you see a deal, you know it's a deal and you're going to scoop it up and subdivide it and hopefully make a bunch of money.
Yeah, and even that, when you say, finding large pieces of land to purchase, even 60 minutes outside of a city, even that to me sounds like I didn't know that still exists. So I mean, it's it kind of a, you have that, is the idea to kind of harness that path of progress, like, hey, especially in that subdivide model, you're looking at, this is where developers are going to develop to create almost like a commuter type city. Is that your focus, or is you have a different strategy, or maybe it depends on where you're at?
Yeah, I'm not so much focused on what developers are doing because I don't work with developers. I go straight to Joe Schmo who wants to buy a piece of land outside the city. So, if you're seeing population growth in the city, that is certainly a really good sign, which most cities nowadays are growing. The faster ones, the ones that are growing faster, are going to have a lot higher demand for raw land. I tell people you want to kind of have a market where obviously it has jobs, it has preferably a big international airport or international airport. You hear people talk about that, but you want to find a city that people like want to be there or as a reason to move there. Like I did my slowest moving subdivision was in Fort Stockton, Texas, and we still have a few lots left out there that we're trying to sell, and it's been over a year now with only 20 lots. In a market like Lubbock, Texas, or Dallas, Fort Worth, if you had 20 lots, you'd expect to sell that in like less than 3 months because, DFW, plenty of jobs, people want to move here. It's a growing city. Fort Stockton, not so much. I got a smoking deal on that piece of land. I'm still going to make a bunch of money, but it's not near as good of a market as a Dallas, Fort Worth, or Lubbock, which is driven, of course, by Texas Tech, and it's a growing, booming city. Dallas, Fort Worth, a ton of jobs, growing, booming city. So I think less in terms of path of growth and more just in terms of in general and a broad kind of high level view. Is the city growing? Is there a reason to be there? And then when we go in to identify a massive project, call it $1 million subdivision that we're going to sell for 3, 4, 5 million bucks, we are really getting down into the weeds. I'll go into public records on like courthouse search and stuff, see what has sold nearby and for how much. So I'm like pulling direct comps. I'll contact real estate professionals in the area. Hey, what's selling and for how much? Kind of pick their brain. They're kind of boots on the ground, obviously. We'll do a Facebook test. So we'll crank up a piece on Facebook Marketplace or with a business page ad and run some ads to it, $200-300 worth of ads, and see what sort of demand and response we're getting from the actual market, and call it a Hill County, Texas, near Hillsboro or something like that. Like, put out a 10-acre piece in your desired area, what maybe it's an hour east of Los Angeles or whatever it is, and see who actually messages you on that piece of land. So we're kind of reverse market testing before we actually buy a lot of these pieces of land. There's quite a bit of detailed things like that actually go into it, where we kind of extremely narrow in what we know we're going to sell it for, so that way we know what we're going to buy it for and how much money we're going to make before we even do the project.
And if you're doing that, you're sort of reverse engineering that price, then before you buy it, these are, I'm assuming, off market pieces of land. You're then going direct to
sell.
A
lot of times I'm buying on market. Like 90% of my stuff, man, maybe 80% of my stuff nowadays is on market.
Oh wow. And that,
like I have been told by brokers and realtors before, like I'm in negotiations, like, hey, I want to buy this 600 acres of land. Okay, cool. We're kind of going back and forth. Meanwhile, I'm cranking up a Facebook test on what a 10-acre lot is going to do in that location, and I'll put the location on there. And there has been several times where myself or students in the group have been like, hey, the broker sees it, like, hey, you need to take this down because the owner doesn't like it, or there's people trespassing, whatever, and we take it down. But by that time, at least probably a day has gone by and we've gotten the data that we need. So it's like a ask for forgiveness, not for permission type of scenario. But it's never had a problem with it outside of that.
No, I mean, it makes sense. Wow, I guess it is like, this is what I love about real estate and this podcast. And like, there's so many different ways to be successful and kind of make your mark in real estate. And this is just, it sounds like you said you have a background as an engineer.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've got the systems dialed in and things like that, like that kind of approach to what you're doing, and I'm sure that's very helpful for your own business and helpful for your students as well, in terms of teaching them those. When you're doing these subdivisions, then you're not trying to sell them to developers? Are you doing any entitlement or anything like that, or you're literally just looking for someone to kind of take it at the next step once it's subdivided?
So I've done a lot of different things. I've pretty much done it all. I mean, we've done minor subdivides where, of course, it's just basically running out a surveyor and staking off the lots, and you don't need any approvals. A lot of times when you step outside of city limits, in most states in this country, there is a process and loophole that they allow you so that you don't have to do any entitlements, rezoning, engineering, anything like that. Like in Texas, it's pretty much a 10-acre rule. In Tennessee, it's even lower, 5 acres in most cases. Alabama, Georgia, a lot of those states, they could care less as long as you're outside of city limits and have the lots surveyed off, so you could sell off 1-acre lots, or in some cases even less. But I try to stay away from entitlements. I've certainly gone through county approvals and have done what is called a major subdivide, where we're building gravel roads, running some power, maybe drilling some water wells, etc., doing some light engineering, drainage studies, all that stuff. But I don't do any rezoning. I don't do any entitlements. I try to stay away from those projects. They're higher risk. And I think that the real blue ocean, honestly, is outside of city limits. Little to no restrictions, where you can go in and it's really easy and feasible to break these lots down from 100 acres down to 1, 5, or 10-acre lots. And then I sell them off straight to the end consumer with little to no restrictions, is what I like to do, where they can go put a mobile home out there, build a home, do a commercial shop, build a business, really have livestock, do whatever they want to do. I don't like working with developers. This is kind of a big misnomer in the land space. People see me doing these subdivides and creating these plats and paper lots. They think I'm selling them off to developers or something. That's not the case. The developers move so slow. They have crazy options, due diligence periods. They don't really see the land the way I see it. I like the little restriction stuff where they can do whatever they want. Developer thinks, site built homes inside the city where people are 10-minute commute away from the hospital or whatever. So that's a completely different business model. The land home guys with the mobile home companies are more so who I work with, and I hardly work with them as is, but we're getting cashed out on 3 different lots right now where I owner finance them to customers. And they went out and found themselves a mobile home, and the mobile home company's wrapping their land into the mobile home purchase. And so I'm getting paid off on my note that I'm carrying with them when I owner finance them the land. So we do some of that, but I try not to work with any developers or any of those guys. They just move too slow. By the time they get their act together and get done with their 180-day due diligence period, I mean, I've already gotten the whole subdivision sold.
Yeah, it sounded like, just when you were talking about, kind of the speed of from purchase to subdivide to sell, it sounded like you almost just couldn't do any of that stuff because it's gonna slow it down so much.
Yeah, it's a pain in the butt, man. And you got to respect those guys and what they need. I mean, they are huge corporations in a lot of cases, your DR Hortons and all these other guys building homes, and they got investors and they're public companies. So they want to cross all their T's and dot their I's. And so that's to be expected, that they're going to have long due diligence periods and kind of really bend you over and have the contract favor them every which way that they can.
Yeah, it makes sense. It just, as you said, it's a different business model. The mayor,
you can make a lot of money with that business model, by the way. You can make millions of dollars.
Yeah, they're doing fine.
Quarter acre lots.
DR Horton is not hurting for money. So, the mayor of Cornudas, tell me that story. How did that kind of come about?
Cornudas, Texas is a small unincorporated town about 50 miles east of El Paso in Hudspeth County, Texas, in the middle of the desert. And so it was early 2022, and I saw this town listed for sale on Facebook, and someone had sent it to me, and I'm like, okay, that looks cool. It had like hundreds, if not thousands, of shares and likes and everything at the time. I'm like, man, it's out in the middle of nowhere. How am I actually going to buy this? I live in Fort Worth. It's 8-9 hours away. How am I going to manage it? There's hardly anyone that even lives out there who's going to work there. Lo and behold, it's actually been the complete opposite experience. But I went out there in late 2022 after deciding that I think I wanted to purchase it, because what better way to build social media and a following and your brand and everything than to own a town. And we go out there, do the whole tour of the property, and it was as crazy as you could have imagined. A town in the middle of nowhere with a very interesting owner who was trying to sell it and wanted to sell it without any inspections, sight unseen. And he had some property taxes due on the place, and so he was going to lose it in foreclosure. And I was pretty much the only buyer. So after that crazy tour, I said, I want to do this. And so we kind of had a really interesting closing process with it, but we got it done after about 2 months of back and forth. Closed it through a title company, so I did get title insurance on it, but I did not get any inspection or anything on it. So I walk into this place, and the water tank is leaking. The kitchen had a leaking roof, and so the whole roof on the backside of the cafe needed to be replaced. There were just so many problems with it. Things broke. Things need to be fixed, repaired. We redid the whole kitchen. Like, we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars fixing that place up. But we are actually, I think, about a week or two from opening, finally. And so it's got a cafe, motel, RV park, convenience store. So it's most famous for the Cornudas burger. So we got burgers, and you imagine like this little town, little cafe in the middle of the desert in between El Paso and Carlsbad. And you got people who stop and come out to the desert. A lot of bike riders who go out there for weekend rides to grab a burger. So it's going to be really interesting. Got short-term rentals and a cafe, basically. And we're going to see how much I can grow it as the unofficial mayor. Because, it's an unincorporated town. So it's like not technically a municipality with a government, but I can claim that I'm mayor.
Yeah, you can. That's who's gonna compete with you for that? No one's gonna try to take that title from you. So.
Yeah, I'm just the mayor and the sheriff and everything all in one, and just reign supreme.
That's an amazing story, and like also maybe the most Texas thing ever. That to hear that story is just like, I don't know where else that would happen. Maybe Oklahoma, something
well.
Like that.
Yeah, people see it from the outside on social media, but from the inside, it's just a lot of crazy stories. It's been a fun time with friends, family. I came into this whole deal thinking, it's in the middle of nowhere. Who am I going to get to work out there? And how is this actually going to pan out? But it's been the complete opposite. Like, I've had to turn people away because everyone wants to come work for me. Everyone wants to come help out. When are you opening? And we've actually had people like kind of upset, like, how come you aren't open yet? We want to come in and get a burger and meet you and everything. And so it's just been an interesting experience. And I mean, the previous owner left basically everything behind. I mean, he left me 6 donkeys, a bunch of cats, like a whole bunch of artwork, memorabilia, like everything down to furniture, like beds, mattresses, linens, like old clothes. Like he pretty much, I mean, everything and anything you can imagine. There were some interesting finds in there. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. You gotta open a museum in the town. You have a little
Well, the
little.
funny thing is, if you're familiar with Texas, there's a place in kind of the middle of nowhere. There's a Prada store out near Valentine, Texas, and it's kind of like an art installation. And they have some Prada merchandise in there, and it's just like people stop in the middle of nowhere along the highway and they take pictures and everything. So I want to do stuff like that out in Cornudas. We'll probably
Yeah.
do like a Gucci store or something and like do our own twist on it. But yeah, I mean, it's just an interesting place where really the sky is the limit. I get all sorts of crazy ideas. Props to all the people who hit me up from the podcast and social media. You should do this. You should do that. I've got some good brainstorms from it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's like. I mean, it's cool. It's a cool social media brand building, like you said, like to be able to involve the people that are kind of already following you, and hey, look at this. This guy's like literally building a town.
Yeah.
It's a really neat thing to have,
Well,
and that's there's not
yeah,
much
yeah.
there.
Interestingly enough, I actually just bought another property 2 miles away. I don't know if you saw that one with a hangar and
Yeah.
a gravel airstrip.
Yeah.
And so I'm like thinking, how can I have the Cornudas airport if this thing grows? But that property's actually gotten a lot of attention because, of course, everyone sees the airstrip and the hangar in the middle of nowhere and they automatically think of like nefarious things. So like everyone has been, hey, what are you actually doing out here? Where I'm thinking like I'm going to turn this into a short-term rental, like a lodge, and this thing's actually going to be legit. And everyone else is like their heads in the gutter, like thinking about like smuggling or some other stuff. And I'm like, yeah, we're not trying to do any of that.
Yeah, you could just, I mean, with the airstrip there in a hangar, you could just, you create a destination for people that are, have their own small planes and pilot license, they fly there for a long weekend. You said you have short-term rentals, like that's set
Yep.
up perfectly. You can really create a pretty amazing destination out of Cornudas and have, the burger, the shops, all of that. It's kind of an amazing
Do you
idea.
know
And it,
anything about like apparently that's a thing, and I didn't know it was a thing. Like the airplane like properties like that own a property with a private airstrip and like a luxury air community.
Yeah, I mean I don't have one, but I know that that's a thing, and I know that there are places where like that's a part of living there, where you have a little airstrip, and then every house might have their own little hangar in it if they've got enough space. So you could, that's what I'm saying. Like you could easily do something like that for even for, doesn't necessarily have to be people that live there, but like people that visiting and they fly themselves in, come to your
Yeah.
airport. You have some hangar parking for their airplane while they're there, and they spend however long. It'd be amazing. I really think that's a super cool. And like I don't know about anything like that. Like there are places that have communities that have the airstrip attached, but I don't know about vacation destinations where people just fly in, and maybe there are. I don't have a plane or a pilot's license, but it
I hate
seems like
flying,
if you
so
did, it would be a cool way to go. So I love it. I
yep.
love the idea. That's amazing. Awesome. Well, John, I'll switch gears here and ask you the questions that I ask every guest, although I'm going to leave one out because you've already told us something really
Okay.
cool and interesting about yourself. But first one that I always ask is just based on the name of the show being Know Your Why. So what is your why? What's driving you? Really fascinating story and kind of some just fun stuff that's happening. But what keeps you motivated in business?
Yeah, I think everyone has different motivations, and it's good to know your motivation and what it is. Some people it's money, some people it's materialistic things, some people it's status, etc. For me, I've always been motivated more by being the most known and respected at what I do. I don't know, something about that makes me feel accomplished, and especially if I can provide value to others along the way, just to be known as, hey, Jon is the man when it comes to land. And so that's kind of what keeps pushing me forward, is to be the most known and respected person in the land space. And so, there's a lot of other people in the land space, a lot of other real estate people. It's a fun challenge. It keeps me on my toes, on top of my game. And thankfully, I've been able to help out a bunch of other people along the way. I mean, I always tell people you're not going to hear from me that I'm the most altruistic, selfless person, because I think there's always a give and take between selfish and selfless. And so I kind of like to think I'm selfishly helping other people to also selfishly accomplish my goal, which is to be the most known person in the land space. And, outside of business, that's more like a business and life related thing, I think. But I don't know. I like just being healthy, happy, and I think health always comes first. And so to tie that in with the business goals is an extreme challenge, especially when you're super busy and run multiple companies. But it's a fun challenge, and every day is a different fun roller coaster. So here we are.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I think a lot of times that, kind of, you can call it selfishness, but I don't think even that's the right word, but that interest in, being good at what you do, being known for what you do. The reality is usually if you're in that situation, it's also because you're helping a lot of people. Like that's what at the end of the day, like, you feel good about it. But if you're, some people equate wealth as a negative thing. Some people equate success as a negative thing. But like, the reality is there's very few people that get wealthy and successful and then just, keep it all to themselves and aren't helping others. And so it's pretty cool perspective, and to sort of recognize that piece of it. I think sometimes people are afraid to admit it, but we all have, like, that's why anybody who wants to do something big, like, part of it is it's cool. Like, if you want people to notice that you did a cool thing, and look, and I'm bringing people along with me. So, very cool. When people hear this and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way?
Man, probably just on all social media at Jon Jasniak. I do a lot on Instagram. YouTube's growing. I answer all DMs, all emails, all that stuff. You can find some of my contact info just Googling me around. But Instagram DMs or YouTube's the best way to hit me, just at first and last name, Jon Jasniak.
Okay. And we'll put that stuff in the show notes too. Final question for you, Jon. What piece of advice would you give to someone who is they're looking to get started in land investing? They hear this and they're like, yeah, that sounds great. What would you tell them as a good, stepping off point?
Man, well, the first deal is the hardest, that's for sure. Once you get that, it's usually downhill from there. But consistency is the hard thing, and not only land investing, but most of any business. And so to be consistent with it, to, continually learn, whether it's free stuff on YouTube or in a community or with a course or whatever, but just to be consistent with it, to continually be pushing yourself, because you're going to find yourself in a situation where you've probably done a deal or two, you've had some success, you're going to want to get complacent. So get that first deal under your belt, then you got to be extremely consistently looking for deals, following up, posting stuff, making calls to the county, calls to sellers, etc.
Yeah, love it. Great advice. Listen, thank you so much for coming on the show. Love hearing the story. I'm really excited to hear, follow along and watch Cornudas grow, and hopefully get out there some point. That would be super cool to see it in person. But thank you for taking the time out today. I appreciate it very much.
Well, thanks for having me, Jason, and you are welcome in Cornudas anytime. We're going to hook you up with a burger and luxurious short-term rental anytime you want it.
Yeah, you tell me it's got a great burger, I'm in. That's pretty much a selling point for about any place for me. So yeah, I would love it. Folks listening, I know you're going to love this episode. Make sure you follow Jon, find him on social media. Very entertaining account, I can tell you firsthand. And please like, rate, and review the show so we can get more great guests like Jon. Thank you all for listening.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?